and we're kind of just telling him like, hey, the sheriff's going to come soon. Like, we got to figure something out so you can move. And it's just it's not like there's no win-win in these sort of situations, because it's like you're stepping into the middle of a family dispute, and you're on the one hand helping the one sister, but then on the other hand, like you're sort of like the enemy of the other sister. So it's been sort of an emotional roller coaster, I'd say.
Welcome back to Real Estate Deals. Today, I got my new friend Alex from the Sub2 community on with me. He is an expert at creative finance and fix and flips, and he's got a crazy story for us today. But before we even get into that, let's get to know Alex a little bit. Alex, tell us
Right.
about yourself a little bit. First, how did you get involved or how did you get interested even in real estate investing? What piqued your interest in it?
Sure. And thanks again for having me, Sonny. This is great to connect and share with your audience. My real estate journey started in 2020 when the shutdown happened. A lot of people were pivoting their professions. Before that, I was strictly a music guy, did music production, was in a band with my wife, in a band with my brother, toured, did the whole thing. So once the live music shut down, I had to figure something else out. And I picked up Rich Dad Poor Dad. That seems to be everybody's sort of their introduction to the whole concept. And then from there, I found a local mentor, and I've just been working with him ever since.
Isn't that amazing how many people found Rich Dad Poor Dad first and were inspired by that, and then that led down like a whole rabbit hole.
It's crazy.
So you picked up Rich Dad Poor Dad, and then how did you come across this mentor?
Well, I went to bigger pockets after that, so it's
Okay.
sort of natural progression. You go Rich Dad Poor Dad, then you search real estate investing, you go to bigger pockets, started consuming a ton of podcasts, and everything on there is like, you got to find a mentor, you got to, it's the fastest way to success is to find a mentor. So I'm like, how am I going to do this? So I just typed in real estate mentor, and I found a few people on the forums that said they'd be open to mentoring. I think I made a post that said I'll work on your YouTube channel for free, because at the time I was doing
Ah,
music production and video production for my own channel, which was music. And so I was like, maybe I could use these skills to bring value. And so I worked with a couple people. One guy, he was out of state, and so I think I made like 10 episodes for him, and we didn't really click after the end. So I was like, okay, let me find somebody local. So then I reached out to another guy, and I didn't even get a response for him. Then I reached out to Joe, who's my mentor now. He's like, yeah, come to this meetup. He's doing Zoom meetups. So I was like, okay. And I'm just kind of sitting there um, in the meetup, and I'm not saying anything because I'm like brand new. And he calls me out. He's like, Alex, what are you doing here? Like, introduce yourself. What are you trying to get into? And he said, I want to learn how to flip. He's like, all right, well, come to my office next week and I'll show you everything. I was like, whoa, okay, that was easy. So I went to his office, and he walked me through like a few flips he was doing, got me hooked. And then I kind of said the same thing. I was like, I want to learn from you, but in return, I'll do your, work on your YouTube channel. So I've made like, I think over 200 videos for him now. And it's been an amazing journey.
amazing. Wow,
Yeah.
that's a really creative and clever way to find a way to add value back and not just say, "Hey, I'm going to learn from you." And thank you. I mean, which a thank you is enough for some people, but
Mm-hmm.
to find a way to work together
Mm-hmm.
that really gives that relationship longevity and gives you a path to grow, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then he kind of saw that I was like coming in every week, consistently doing the videos, and I was learning a lot because I was going on projects with him. So just being fully immersed in it, it was totally worth it for me.
And at what point did you take the plunge and do your first deal?
So I was just looking back at all this stuff recently because we're putting together like a wholesaling course right now. So I went back to my first deal, and it was I was doing some agent outreach in October 2020, so 3 years ago. And I actually got a call back from one of the agents who's like, I need a cash offer on this deal. Um, these people just inherited a house and the tenants want to buy it, but they're not going to qualify. So I want to bring in an investor. So would you be interested? So I was like, oh my God, got a deal going. This is crazy. So I called Joe and I was like, would you want to buy this? Like, if I can lock it up? He's like, yeah, do it. And so he kind of walked me through the whole thing, putting an offer in. And that's when I made like my first wholesale deal was I got paid on January 1st, 2021.
Amazing timing.
Yeah. So cool. I was
Did
like,
you
oh my
wait? Did
God.
you pick that timing so that you like start a new tax year, or did it just
No,
happen to
it was just
be?
like the closings were getting like pushed because of the it's all like wonky, whoever's open at the end. And it just happened to like I think it closed on like whatever the Friday was, and then the Monday was like the first. So came and picked up a check. I was like, heck yeah.
That's an amazing way to start a new year.
I know. Yeah, and I've been hooked ever since then. So from there, pretty much wholesaled for like 18 months, and then I found a really good deal out in Hemet. Um, and so I was like, Joe, like put me in, like let's partner. He's like, okay, I'll take a look at it. So yeah, there was enough spread in there to even if I kind of screwed up, we'd still make a pretty good profit. So he kind of showed me the ropes on the first one, and then we've been partnering ever since.
So you had to kind of feel your way out, and then you probably have to feel out his buy box too, because your mentor happened to be your buyer.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
did he mentor you and also like what his criteria were, so you can go out and prospect for deals like that?
Yeah, exactly. And it was a pretty general buy box. So I was just I was kind of learning the skills of just lead generation and talking to sellers and all that kind of stuff. So anything that was like a really good deal was just like here, which is kind of nice. Here's the deal. And he's like, okay.
It helped that you were delivering the value with the YouTube channel and you had a
Mhm.
relationship with him, so you could easily have conversations about it. Because a lot of people are scared about, hey, if I take this to this buyer, it might burn the relationship because I'm not.
Oh,
It's
sure.
not a good deal or whatever. Right?
Oh, exactly. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I mean, there's tons of times which now like looking at people who are newer, than I am, where you look at a deal, you're like, that's not a deal. And they're like, but maybe if put it two ADUs in the back. And you're like, it's just not a deal. Just give it up. So there were a bunch of times where I'd bring him something. I'm like, hey, look at this. He's like, not a deal. It's like, damn it.
You ask them why though, so you can learn.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, you just be like, they want way too much, which is usually how it works. They want way too much. You're underestimating the repairs, and then your ARV's off. Those are like the three main things that always, if one of those things is off, it kind of screws up the whole thing.
Right. Yeah. So you have to like to get the ARV, you have to learn how to do what's called comping, right? You have to really
Right.
get good at what is the value in this neighborhood after this is repaired. So for people that don't know, ARV stands for after repair value. If you go in, you buy it for a low enough price, and then you fix it, you add a whole bunch of value into the property, and
Yep.
then after that, it's worth X, and that's what's called the after repair value. And
Exactly.
then and then you're looking to make a margin based on what you bought it for and what you sold it for, and of course, all the money you had to put into it to
Right.
make it worth that much, right?
Exactly. And in most wholesalers or any deals that you look at as a buyer, one of those things is always off. Like they're pulling comps from like the whole other side of the county. They're they're asking too much because they want this giant fee, or they're underestimating the repairs.
Yeah. So, in your opinion, how hard is it? And we're in Southern California. How hard is it in this market to be a wholesaler these days?
Jeez. It's all about like how much time you're willing to put into it, because I know people that are killing it wholesaling here in SoCal, and they're just doing work consistently. They have their systems down, so they're constantly qualifying leads, and then finding the best one. So even now, when they say that the market is kind of slowing down, I know people that are just still killing it.
Good to know.
Yeah.
And you have gone sort of, would you say, graduated from wholesaling to fixing and flipping?
Yeah, well, I like to tell people that wholesaling is just one exit strategy. So, if we look at a deal and we're gonna make X amount over the wholesale deal, then we'll flip it. But, at the end of the day, if it's easier to just sell it to another investor who's looking for a deal and you're going to make, this amount for doing like essentially just flipping the contract, then I say go for that. So it's not necessarily graduating, it's just adding another exit strategy to, what you're able to do.
And how do you decide between what you're going to do, wholesaling or flipping?
So we'll look at it usually as a wholesale. And then if we run the numbers and we say, hey, if we end up putting like 50 grand into it, our profit will be, 3 times as much, then let's go ahead and flip it. If it's not, and we're only going to make an extra 10, 20 grand on it, then let's just wholesale it.
Okay, so you have some rules in place about when it's worth to go that other route and put in all the work and time,
Exactly. Because it
and there's some
honestly,
stress involved in that too, like actually managing construction crews and all this stuff,
for
right?
sure, for sure. And, like on our first couple of flips, we did pretty good, and our contractor was like really easy to work with. And it wasn't until I think like our fifth flip where we went out to Joshua Tree, we didn't know, our contractor didn't want to go that far. So we had to find somebody out there, and it was just like the project nightmare that you like see on all these like flipping shows where the guy doesn't show up and he's like overcharging you and he's, like lying to you and all that kind of stuff. That's when I realized, okay, this is a lot harder than I thought.
Wow. And
Yeah.
just briefly, how did you get out of that?
Well, basically, we were trying to list it before the, sort of the end of the year when nobody's really doing anything. And he just kept pushing the timeline. He's like, 2 more weeks, it'll be done. 2 more weeks, 2 more weeks. And then finally I was like, all right, he's not gonna happen. So I pulled him off. I was like, dude, it's not working out. Pulled him off. And then I made, I was like, dude, to our other contractor who was out in him, and I was like, you got to come out here and help me finish this. So we made it worth his while, and he came and finished it.
That says a lot about working with people you trust.
That's it. And yeah, I was just naive before that. I was like, oh, it's not that hard, because that guy was actually would show up and do what he said he was going to do. I was like, I don't know why everyone says it's so hard. And then once you go through that, you're like, okay, now I get it.
Did your mentor help you find or introduce you to the original construction people that you work with, or
No, no, he's good about saying, this is what you need to do, and then having you do it rather than just like handing it off. It's like, okay, go and get 3 guys out there, get a bid from each one, feel it out, and then kind of helps that way.
okay, so he gave you some guidance. He didn't give you direct introductions, or
Exactly.
he didn't
And then,
put a team around you.
right. And then now they were working on more projects than he does. He has his guys, and it's like, we'll call him in. But it's just like anything, like you want to constantly be making new connections and having other people that you can call in, because someone will be reliable for 2022, but then it goes into 2023, starts wavering, and then it gets pulled off. It's like, we got to pull him off. I don't know what happened, he was good. So it's always good to have other people you can count on.
Life happens.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's why they say one is the worst number in business.
If you got one, you got none.
Well, I guess zero might be the worst number. One
Right.
is one is the second worst.
One's right there. They're neighbors, and it's scary.
They're neighbors. I like that. See, that's such a good way to put it. Um, so you had some good experience, or you had a lot of experience, good and bad experience
Yes.
before you got into the deal you're going to tell us about today.
Right.
Um, you want to jump in and start describing that deal? Because when you told me
Yeah.
about it, I was like, I just kept saying, "Wow, that's amazing."
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So this was kind of it was on the absentee owner list, which we're constantly reaching out to. So absentee owner is somebody that has a property that they're not currently living there. Um, reached out to the seller, and she says, originally in the text, like, well, it's listed on market, so reach out to the real estate agent. And so I just respond, okay, that's fine. Can you just tell me about it? And then she goes, well, if you give me 450, I'll accept your offer right now. Huh. Okay, let me just take a look, pull it up. I see it's listed for 550. I was like, all right. So she's starting 100K lower. That's like a red flag. She's going through something. Major pain. So So I was like, okay, I need to get her on the phone. And she was kind of just ducking my calls and just saying, just give it to the agent. And I was like, no, I need to get her on. So I kept just kind of reaching out to her, calling her. And finally, one time I'm driving home. I was like, let me just called her one more time. And I finally got her on the line. And I was like, hey, I'm gonna put a offer in with your agent, but I just can you kind of tell me what's going on? Like, I know there's like people living there. There's something going on with the tenants. And right off the bat, she says, look, if you can help me out, I will literally give you the house right now for nothing. I was like, okay. That's interesting. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. So she just unravels, gives me the whole story. Basically, she had a sober living home that her and her sister were running, and she wanted to get out of the business. She gave the property to her sister, almost like a sub two, where the mortgage was in her name, and as long as the sister paid it, she could have the property. So the sister never transferred the property into her name and then stopped making the payments. So the house was going into foreclosure, and the auction date was like, I think like a week out from when I was talking to her. So I was like, oh my God, this is a lot going on here. Let's let's see what we can do. So um and then she also tells me the sister who's living there is not letting people in to view the property. So like an inspector came by, they had a buyer originally, but they had to back out because no one was letting people into the house. So it was a whole mess. And I say, okay, this is what we got to do. So if you do exactly what I say, then we're going to, help you from this going into foreclosure, basically, because she didn't know what to do at this point. And the agents were like, we've listed it and I don't know what else to do. So our plan was to take over the second lien. So that's who was foreclosing, was the second lien holder. The first was also about to go into foreclosure because they stopped paying the first. So the second, 100, I think 187 was owed on the second. But this is the crazy part. I looked at the original note, and it was from like 2010 was the original second, and there was a balloon payment that was supposed to be collected and never was for 10 years. And then they're finally like foreclosing this year. I was like, that's weird. And I called up the second. I was like, what's like going on with this? Like you're saying they owe you 187. The original note was like 80 grand. So they tacked on $100,000 in fees. And so what we ended up doing was negotiating with the second and getting them down $100,000 uh to where, or no, I think we got them down like 80 grand. So they're like, if you give us 100 grand, then we won't foreclose on them. So that's what we ended up doing, paying off the second. And then we took over the first subject too, meaning the debt is still in her name. The mortgage is still in her name, but she sold the property to us and basically stopped the foreclosure. She was super pumped. And then we were like, okay, now we got to figure out how to get, the sister out of the property. And that has been a whole nother saga in itself.
And so before you continue on, yeah, how's it possible to have a second lien holder who's lower priority and getting paid back debt? How is it possible that they can foreclose if the primary lien holder is not foreclosing?
Yeah. I mean, you do have basically what they were going to do is they were going to foreclose and then they were going to take over the original. And their plan, once I kind of researched it, is they'll do this. They'll have the second, they'll foreclose, and then they'll just relist the property. So they'll take the property over, take title, and then relist it to recoup, you know, that amount.
That's
But it's
interesting.
possible. Yeah. And then what I did was I told them, well, the first is in foreclosure now. So that's when they kind of got scared because If the first forecloses, then they get nothing. So that's why they were open to playing ball and kind of coming down, 80 grand.
Ah, so you
That
use that
was
as
why.
leverage. You're like, well, if the
Yeah.
first lien holder, which is probably a bank, right? They gave
Mm-hmm.
them the mortgage. They're going to foreclose any day now or any week now because they're not
Yep.
getting paid either.
Exactly.
And so unless you make a deal soon, they're going to foreclose, and then they're going to get the priority for getting the house, not you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then you would actually get nothing
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
instead of 100 grand that we might give you. You're going to get nothing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow,
I was
that's
pretty
leverage,
surprised.
right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's all stuff like Joe told me to say, and I was like, then they came back. They're like, all right, we'll do it for 100 grand. I was like, oh my god, it worked.
That makes sense, right?
Yeah, it totally does.
Because they have all this pressure. It's not like, yeah, we'll be nice, we'll be
Right.
kind, we'll be compassionate, and we'll give it to you for. It's like, no, we might get nothing here.
Yeah. Exactly.
We'll take 100K instead.
Yeah. I was like, yeah, makes sense. So we took that over, or we paid that off. Literally the day that they were going to go to auction, they stopped it, and then we got that handled. And so we took over the first. I think she owed maybe 20 grand on the first. So then we caught that up and then have been making payments. And this happened back in February.
So when you ran the numbers, you saw that paying the 100K on the second position and paying 20K on in arrears on the that's what it's called when they owe
Mm-hmm.
the money. Currently, they're behind on their payments on the mortgage. That's
Yep.
called in arrears. So you
Right.
pay that 20K, you're out 120K, right?
Mm-hmm.
And was that your entire expense for taking over the house?
Yeah. Yeah. That's at that point it was. And then we've had some other expenses now because we've had to deal with going through a whole eviction process.
All
Um,
right. So tell us about that. Is that the next part of the story?
yes. So we do it like we normally do, and we just say, hey, I went over to the house. I said, hey, um, we're the new owners, and this is sort of what's going on, and um, we're gonna end up rehabbing the property. So I think you guys are gonna have to find somewhere else to go, and we can assist you. We can do what's called cash for keys, where we give you money out of our pocket to assist with like the moving and all that stuff. And they were completely not about it. They basically said, no, we own the house. My sister gave it to me, so we own the house. And then I was like, what? Well, it was about to go into foreclosure. So I don't see how that makes sense. But they're like, no, we're going to fight this and we're going to like sue my sister for title. And I was like, well, she doesn't own it anymore. So that part doesn't matter. But they just kind of wanted to fight the whole way. So I
So
just basically told them,
did you already take the title?
yeah, we had already closed. So
Okay.
I was going over there to kind of introduce myself and then also to take pictures because no one had seen the inside of the property in a while. Um, and it honestly it didn't need that much work. So that's why we're like, okay, maybe we can just go in there, repaint it, and then relist it. Well, it was probably after we kind of had a blowout. She's like blocked my number, said they were gonna get a lawyer. I was like, okay, this is gonna get drawn out a lot farther than they wanted it to. So we start the eviction process, which typically takes about like 3 months until they'll serve them and then go through the whole process. We use a lawyer here locally in Orange County who's really good, and he serves them and basically sets up like a court date to see the whole process through. And it it sometimes depends like on the courts and how backed up they are. So it ended up taking, I think, 3 maybe 4 months to actually get a court date. And so we get the court date and they're not paying the whole time. So we go to the court date and she kind of gives like the sob story of the whole thing that happens. And the judge is like, oh, well, since title's being, called into question, then we need to set up a different court date to make sure that everything was on the up and up. And we're kind of explaining it to her like, no, we went through the whole process. We had title insurance. It's like it's a legit deal. So, what can we do here? And she was like, well, I want to just make sure that they get their fair shake. And we're like, okay, that's fine. So I think another month and a half goes by, and she was supposed to produce any sort of evidence that she was actually the owner. So we go back in court, and she's like, "No, I don't have anything actually." So that's when we got the judgment of like, okay, you guys, you have 40 days to move out. So we kind of wait the 40 days. And at that point, you're waiting for what's called the writ of possession, where the sheriff will come by and basically turn over the um, the possession back to you, like the owner. So we're waiting, and the sheriffs are all backed up. So I think it's like it ended up being like another 2 months. Um, and we're kind of just telling them like, hey, the sheriff's gonna come soon. Like, we got to figure something out for so you can move. And it's just it's not like there's no win-win in these sort of situations, because it's like you're stepping into the middle of a family dispute, and you're on the one hand helping the one sister, but then on the other hand, like you're sort of like the enemy of the other sister. So it's been sort of an emotional roller coaster, I'd say.
Oh yeah, sounds like it. Even went to court. Many things don't go to court. There's often like a threat, whether it's implied or explicit about, yeah, this might go to court. Let's not do that. But in your
Right.
case, you had to.
Yeah.
You mentioned something called title insurance. Would you mind explaining what that is and how did it help you here?
Yeah. So what title does is, they're an insurance company to where they're saying that we have done all of our due diligence, and we say that the person who's selling the property is actually the owner. And if for whatever reason there was like another lien or something that didn't get paid off to where the title was actually supposed to be someone else's, they'll cover any money that you had put in. So like that $100,000, they would have like paid that back to us.
Oh, that's amazing. And how much does that cost?
It's just part of the title check. I don't know how much it actually costs. It's just in the closing, all the closing fees that you get
But
on.
you do have an option to not take it, right?
Yes, yes, but I would not do that ever.
And so what can happen if you don't take title insurance?
So there could be somebody like, let's say the second actually ended up like foreclosing, and for whatever reason, like they didn't go through the proper channels, but it in this case they actually did own the property and they could prove it, and then the original owner sold it to you. Then basically like they would come back and say no, that they weren't actually the owner. So if we had done any repairs or anything like that, it actually goes back to that second lien holder. So it's in your best interest to make sure the title looks at everything. They look at all the liens, make sure there's no extra judgments on there, and everything is free and clear.
And when you say when you make sure title looks at everything, you're talking about the title company
Right.
making sure to look at everything related to the title of that property, the history of what has happened, and can you
Yes.
really take possession? Can
Right.
you take possession of that property so that you know that that's your property, and then you can go forward with that, knowing that if you put repairs or anything into that property, that you're not going to lose that property just
Yes.
because some paperwork or something wasn't looked at properly.
Exactly.
All right.
Uh,
So you had control of the property,
mhm.
and officially a judge signed off on that. You got a writ of possession, then
Yes.
WRIT of
Exactly.
possession.
Yep.
Sheriff came over,
Hmm.
and was this what just happened a few days ago,
Yes.
or
This just
okay?
happened a few
So
days
take it
ago.
from there and let us know
Yeah.
what's
So
going
we
on.
exactly. So I'm trying to talk to everybody, try to like talk some sense into them. Like, hey, the sheriff's coming. So I got the number of her daughter, the sister that's living there, and I'm like, hey, like you got to get your mom out because like the sheriff's coming. And when the sheriff comes, they're basically like, hey, it's time to leave. So everyone's got to get out of the house, and we're gonna lock it up, and give the new owners the key. So in our mind, there is so much time that they had to, possibly get another um, situation going. And the whole thing with this is that they're running sort of a fraudulent sober living home to where they're collecting the government subsidies plus rent from the people living there, and then not and then in turn not paying rent or figuring out how to get these people into a new home. So they're sort of just like running a scam and collecting money every month and then just pocketing it. And so like I've done other evictions where like the you get the writ of possession, you get the sheriff lockout date, and then they're gone. So you go and they're, obviously no one's in there. They moved all their stuff out. But here, they literally didn't like move anything out. So they all their stuff was there, and they had other like their clients or the people that were living in the sober living home were there, and so everyone kind of got dragged out. And then that's when they decided to figure out where to put everybody. So it was just like a whole thing happening on this like suburban sort of corner unit. Everyone's coming out and like, what's going on? The cops are there, and it was pretty mellow, but it's just you just don't want it to get to that point. I was just like kind of begging them, like, please, like, let's figure something out, and they just weren't willing to work with us. And then the whole kicker of this thing is they had a pet pot-bellied pig, a giant pig, and like 7 dogs. So they're all the pigs like in the garage. They got dogs. They had like an RV and all this stuff like parked out front, and just no sense of urgency or any plan on what to do once this day came.
Total denial, huh?
Yeah. And I don't know. Like it's tough. Like I felt bad the whole time, but at the same time I was like, why can like we would have helped you try and, facilitate something, but they just were not willing to do anything.
Describe what the scene looks like, because you mentioned people are coming out, etc. I don't think
Yeah.
many of us. I don't know if I ever have. I don't know if I've seen, and many people probably haven't, the scene of cops or sheriff coming out and
Right.
enforcing a foreclosure or
Right.
enforcing a change of title and making like an eviction, because that's what this
Sure.
was. There's an
Right.
eviction that happened as a result of all those other things.
Mm-hmm.
What does that scene look like? Is it just like one police officer and they try to be as quiet as they can, or like did they make a scene? Like what happened?
Yeah. So it started off with one police officer. He rolls out, and then his partner showed up, and they they're super chill. They don't want anything to happen. They're like, hey, let's come to an agreement. So originally he went over. He's like, let me go check what's going on with the property, and so he'll enter, and he basically clears the whole house. So he wants to make sure for his safety. He'll just do like he's like Riverside County Sheriff like coming in, clears the whole house. So basically takes everybody that was inside out front. And then he brought us together, like the tenants, and then my partner and I, and he's like, let's figure something out here. Like, can you give them till the end of the day to get, the rest of the stuff out of the house and on the front yard? And we're like, yeah, that's fine, but are they gonna be out by the end of the day? And spoiler, they're still there. So they're basically, we're like, all right, you guys got to get your stuff out the rest of out by the end of the day. And he's like, and if they're not, you can call the local city police, and then at that point, they put no trespassing signs up. So it's official that they're trespassing. So it's everybody that was staying in the house is out on the front lawn. And then they had like a U-Haul, like a U-Haul truck, like half filled up, and then an RV parked out front, plugged into the house that they've kind of been staying in. And so that was like the whole scene. And then there's just crap strewn about the whole yard into the street. It was a mess.
Wow. And so they're still there. So are those no trespassing signs up now, or what's going on?
Yes, they've been up.
And
And so,
so they're living in the house with no trespassing signs outside the
well,
house.
no, now they're just in the RV.
Oh, they're in the RV.
Yeah,
So they can't trespass into the house.
exactly. But they were like the next day, like, we had our cleanup crew go and their demo guys, and they were just going in and like messing with them. And it's just been It's the gift that keeps on giving. And the pig was there. The pig was there like the last like 5 days. And then I was like, if you guys don't get the pig out, like I'm gonna send it to a rescue place because now it's like not being fed or cared for. And so they at least got the pig out of the garage.
Wow. I don't know what else to say.
You know, I was like, I've never said these words before, but you need to get the pig a home.
That's right.
Yeah. So, oh man, we had people reaching out on Facebook like, I've got a place for the pig. There's a pig sanctuary over in like blah blah blah
That's no,
city.
that's good. That part is wonderful that the pig would be
Yeah.
taken care of, and hopefully the dogs as well, and all of
Oh
that.
God, everybody. And the way once we went in and saw the property, it was a lot worse than I originally had walked it in February, and it was not good. And the fact that they were charging people to stay there was not good either. So it was just a tough situation.
Is that a pattern you've seen before, where the condition of the property degrades as someone goes through foreclosure, knowing that they're going to lose the property?
No, I mean, that was the first one. Like we were kind of scared that they were going to trash the place because it was such a heated thing between the two sisters. And then the one sister would call me and was like, "Hey, I got word that they trashed the place and they threw paint on the floor." And that wasn't the case. It was just they had kind of just given up. And then I guess knowing that long that they just it wasn't going to be their home anymore. Yeah, they had just given up on it. But every other one that I've seen, the people, um, I mean, they respect the property and they're, especially if they're going to sell it and we're getting money in their pocket, they're, respectful about that.
And so, what's the next step?
Yeah. So the next step is we have our guys going out there and we're getting bids on the place, and it's a way bigger rehab than we thought. So we're looking at a few different exit strategies, possibly just making it a turnkey sober living home because those are, I know those are like huge cash flow for the people that are operators of those. So we may like keep it kind of configured like that and try to find an end buyer that is looking for a property like that.
Would you consider keeping that and operating that on your own?
I don't know. Right now I'm just into flipping, not holding anything necessarily just yet.
The appeal of flipping is, I mean, you get your capital out of the property, right? Is there anything
Exactly.
else that appeals to you about flipping versus holding?
Yeah, I mean, seeing the end product, and being creative and working with my wife on that stuff, and it's a fun project to do. Holding, I mean, we did have a couple seller finance mobile homes that we were holding, and then I ended up just wrapping those, meaning I bought them on seller finance and I sold them on seller finance, so I didn't have to do any of the property management. But I know I have to hold eventually for the wealth aspect, but the property managing side is just not conducive to my personality. So I need to figure out something there.
I feel you. Yeah, and you'd have to find someone who's good at that. And even
Sure.
then, like even if you found like the perfect property manager, they're going to come to you with a bunch of decisions like, hey, the sink just broke, or the dishwasher needs repair, or
Yeah. And so
the
it's
roof
getting
is
all those.
leaking, or this person's
Exactly.
complaining about this, and how do we make
Mhm.
them happy? And
Yeah. And it's
all,
it's sort of it's almost like another version of managing like a contractor or something. It's like
yeah.
you got to have all your systems in place. And I usually just jump into stuff being naive about it and being like, how hard can it be? And then that's how I learn all the lessons.
Famous last words.
Yeah, exactly. So it's definitely on the horizon. And then it's just, yeah, figuring out like who who am I gonna partner with on those.
And as much as people talk about the cash flow in sober living, there are reasons why the cash flow is better, because people who live in sober livings probably need more attention than people who don't.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, anything where you have instead of one tenant, I have 15 tenants. Like that's going to come with a whole slew of problems that some people are made for. Like I have a buddy he loves short-term rentals and dealing with the customer and like trying to solve all their problems. And I'm like, that sounds like my worst nightmare.
And now dealing with the cities who don't like Airbnbs and short term rentals.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I mean, for the right person, I mean,
Yeah,
I know someone who was making really good money in that and is now
exactly.
mostly selling out of his properties because it's getting to that point where it's taxed more and more heavily and it's a
Right.
hassle and cities are not conducive to it. And of
Yeah.
course, the market's more saturated. There's lots more of them out there, and
Yeah.
the platforms themselves operate very differently now
Right.
compared to before. They have different ways of ranking. I'm not an expert on it, but there's so many different things that have changed in the last few years
Yeah.
for that.
Absolutely.
So it's like getting, I mean, whoever got into it 5 years ago did really well. And now it's much harder.
Yeah. Exactly.
So is there any other, getting back to your story, is there any other high points or low points, shall we say, or any other highlights that you want to mention about that story and like what you're learning from this?
Um, it's just yeah, I've learned a lot about, just dealing with people's lives. And that's one thing I do like about the whole process is, being able to help people out of certain situations. I mean, the bank was going to foreclose on it, and if they took it over, it would have been a lot harsher because they don't care about the situation. And we were able to sort of be more lenient on, working with the tenant and all that stuff, even to our detriment as far as the bottom line. But um just how to handle situations, de-escalate situations, working with people, it's 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 been it's been a good skill to learn.
Sounds like so much of that in this deal.
Yeah, exactly.
you're getting
No
you're
way
getting
around
a
it. It's
you're
just like,
getting a
oh,
master
okay.
class.
I'm gonna have a conversation I've never had with the person before. Here we go.
How did you decide to get into this deal versus maybe other deals you were considering? There's always other properties out there, and oftentimes, I mean, you've got a pipeline. You're doing active marketing, so
Right.
you're looking at other deals at the same time. How did you decide that this was the one that you wanted to focus in on?
Well, anytime you can do a sub two and take over, a mortgage, and you're all in cash, a lot of times we'll buy properties cash. So we're coming out of pocket like 500, 600, $700,000. This one was like, okay, let's, put in this 100 grand, help out this seller. How hard can it be to get these tenants out? Well, so, so, it's just, it's gonna be a good deal, and it was a good deal, but just like the timeline just got so skewed because of all this other stuff.
And how much longer do you think it's going to take to be able to exit?
Yeah, I mean, now that we're in it, we should be in and out of this thing in like 10 weeks. So that's the that's the whole thing. It's like, okay, once we get the property, it's like that part is easy because we have all that down, just start sending people there, putting in cabinets, flooring. So the turnaround's not going to be that bad.
Are you acting as general? I'm not as a contractor, but are you overseeing subcontractors directly, or do you have a general contractor that's overseeing each one of the trades?
Well, we oversee it. So like my wife handles a lot of it and my partner Joe. And then I'm kind of like the deal finder, deal structure guy. And then yeah, overseeing the day-to-day stuff as well.
So no general contractor.
Yeah. No, we'll sub everything out.
And what's the reason for that?
Um Bottom line. So if you have the general contractor, you end up paying like 30% more just, for having them do everything. So it's
That's a
it's
lot.
yeah, it's a lot and it's a skill. Definitely it's a skill and it's well worth it if you can fit it in there. But then you're still overseeing that guy. So, it's a chance for us to learn and get all the subcontractors working together and just hone our skills that way.
So, like you said, your personality type doesn't fit being a property manager or having to deal with even maybe even having to deal with one, depending on who it is.
Right.
But you don't, in general, like property management. I think for a lot of people, overseeing contractors is not their thing either. Like that's something that I
True.
know I'm not great at.
Right.
How would you suggest someone clarify whether that's something they think they'd like to take on or not?
It's not until you really do it that you kind of find, oh, I despise doing this, or oh, it wasn't so bad, it was pretty fun. And then once you see the payoff of like this property, it looks amazing from when you first saw it, it's like, to me, it's totally worth it.
So in your case, it's in your flow. Sounds like
Hmm. Yeah,
you like to get into it and mix it up, shall we say?
exactly.
Shall we say?
Yeah.
Um, if you could do this all again, like from start to finish, what would you do differently?
Hmm. That's a good question. I'm trying to think. Probably just reach back out to the people and see if we could, strike a deal and not let it get all the way to the final lockout date. Maybe just try a little bit more.
Any particular approaches you would attempt that you didn't this time, like different phrasing, different timing,
Yeah,
different
it's
like
probably
send them a card, send them flowers. I don't know,
yeah,
like
maybe
anything differently you would do.
maybe something like that. It's just but I know that they would have just been like, no, it's not, nothing's gonna happen to us. This is our property, and it would have been thrown back into my face. So it's hard to say. It's really hard to say. That's an excellent question.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times it's easy and it's easy to what if and be like, what if I tried this? And
Yeah, which I definitely like to do. So then the next time I'm like, oh, this is the situation. Now we try this. But
and if you were giving that advice to me or somebody else about what I should do differently or what someone watching this should do differently, if they were gonna approach a deal like this, what would you tell them?
yeah, I would say just make sure that the numbers work. And then if especially if you had to hold this for a year, like make sure those numbers work and you're not jumping in thinking that everything's going to go perfectly smooth and that the timeline is going to be exactly how you think it is.
That is great advice. So many projects, especially in real estate, end up taking a lot longer. And
Sure.
then you've got to factor in that holding cost. Like every month, you're incurring that cost. And
Yep.
that cost can be a lot more than we think.
Absolutely.
And the contractor costs can go up and building costs can go up. And we saw that in the last few years. The price of wood doubled and like materials and labor and everything went up.
Yeah.
So great advice there. And what kinds of deals are you looking at these days that viewers can keep in mind and even reach out to you about?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Anything creative finance, like if you have a seller that's open to maybe holding the note, or if anybody in pre-foreclosure, or if their house is going to auction, um or yeah, anything that will work as a flip.
Especially flips in your case is something you're
Yes.
specializing in.
Yes.
And what areas? Because we're in Southern California, but
Hmm.
how far out do you go? You go to Riverside County.
Yeah.
You go to Ventura County. Do you go to
Nope.
San
No.
Diego County?
No. Yeah. We'll do Orange County, Riverside County, San Bernardino County.
Okay, LA County.
uh no, not really. Just because of permitting and things of that
Hmm.
nature. We found that it can get a little dicey. So, meaning some of the cities can drag their feet and take forever, and then that prolongs the whole process as well.
That's interesting. Yeah, you and I live not super far from each other, but I live
Right.
2 blocks into LA County.
I know. Yeah, for sure. I
And,
know.
and
Go
two
by
blocks
one.
into LA County is the same thing as like 20 miles into LA County. It's
Yeah,
like
exactly.
if you're in LA County, you're in LA County.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
So it's kind of just that's our wheelhouse. So
that's funny.
yeah.
That's good to know.
Mhm.
So, and how can people contact you if they do want to reach out to you about a
Sure.
deal or to learn more from you or whatever?
Absolutely. Yeah. You can reach out to me on Instagram at this is Alex Barnett, or YouTube at this is Alex Barnett. Or you can email me, Alex at trustinghouse.com.
Sounds good. And this is Alex Barnett.
That's right. Thanks.
He's a real, the the real deal on real real estate deals. No AI bots
That's
on your
right.
once saw somebody ask, I was a salesperson I was working with, they asked him if he was an AI bot. So like this is the world these days. They don't
Exactly.
even know if the person's
You have
real or
no
not.
idea.
Just so bizarre. But I promise you, this is Alex is real. I'm real, and we're having a real conversation right now, and we're about to
Great.
wrap up. Um, but if you were to give anybody watching this some parting words of advice, whether for real estate or life in general, what would you tell them?
Two things. One, take action. And then two, consistency. That's literally the whole thing, for me at least. Um, because you see a lot of people, especially in real estate, there's a ton of education. So people get stuck in that sector of just learning, watching videos, podcasts before they even take action. It'll be years go by. So one, to start taking action today, even if you don't know everything, and then two, be consistent. So just do a little bit each day, and it starts to build on itself and snowball faster than you think.
Consistent action. That is awesome advice. Let's all go out there and take even small steps of consistent action. Thank you so much, Alex. We hugely appreciate this. And I know people are going to learn from this.
Thanks, Sonny.
Would love to have you again in the future to share about some more crazy stories.
Sure.
Deals you're working on. No doubt there's going to be some more. Hopefully they're not as stressful and crazy, but you never know, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's part of the fun.
Awesome. Bye
Thank
for
you.
now.